Imagine waking up every day to the sound of flight announcements. No bed, no keys, no door to close behind you, just a bench in the middle of an airport. For 18 years, one man lived here, not by choice, not because he broke the law, but because the world didn't know what to do with him. This is not fiction. This is the story of Mehran Karimi Nasseri, the man who lived in Terminal 1 at Charles de Gaulle Airport, forgotten by governments, trapped by paperwork, and swallowed by silence. Airports are designed for movement. You arrive, you leave, you're never meant to stay. But for Mehran Karimi Nasseri, an airport will become his entire world. Born in 1945 in Masjid Suleiman, Iran, Mehran's early life was surrounded by political unrest and personal mystery. He claimed his mother was British, which would have given him rights to UK citizenship. But that claim was often disputed. What's certain is that by the 1970s, Mehran became politically active. He opposed the Shah of Iran, a dangerous move at the time. As a result, he says, he was arrested, interrogated, and ultimately exiled from Iran. Stripped of his nationality, he became a stateless refugee, drifting through Europe for years. Eventually, in 1981, Belgium granted him official refugee status. For the first time in years, Mehran had legal protection, a new identity, and a fragile sense of security. But his story was far from over, because Mehran had a goal, a dream that would change everything: to go to the United Kingdom, to find his mother, the woman he believed had once lived in Scotland. In 1988, Mehran made his move, with refugee documents from Belgium in hand. He boarded a train to France, intending to catch a flight to London. The plan was simple: arrive in the UK, seek asylum, find his mother, start again. But somewhere along the journey, either during train transfer or in the airport itself, something terrible happened. His documents went missing. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were stolen. Either way, Mehran now had no passport, no refugee card, no proof of who he was. When he landed at Heathrow Airport, UK authorities refused him entry. They had no record of his identity, no papers, no permission. He was put on a plane back to France, to the very place he had just departed. But here's where things get even more surreal. France didn't want him either. With no valid documents, French immigration officials had no legal basis to arrest him, and no country to deport him to, so they did the only thing left to do. They left him there, in Terminal 1, Charles de Gaulle Airport, with no exit, no country, no future. It was supposed to be temporary. A few days, maybe, but the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then, before anyone noticed, years. Mehran Karimi Nasseri was now a permanent resident of Gate 1, Terminal 1. He couldn't leave the airport, but he also couldn't be deported. He was trapped in a legal no man's land, neither here nor there. So he adapted. He created a small routine. He kept his few belongings in a suitcase, always by his side. He ate meals from airport fast food stalls, sometimes from scraps, sometimes from the kindness of staff. He shaved and washed in public restrooms. He began writing in a journal. He read newspapers left behind by travelers. He spoke with airport workers, janitors, security guards, some of whom began to know him by name. Over time, he began to fade into the background, a strange but familiar figure, part of the terminal itself. Some called him the Terminal Man. Others just Alfred, because he had begun calling himself Sir Alfred Mehran. To some, he was delusional. To others, a quiet legend. But to Mehran, this wasn't a story. It was just life. As the years passed, Mehran's story was no longer just airport gossip. He became a mystery, then a curiosity, and eventually an international case. Journalists came to speak with him. His story appeared in magazines, on television, in human rights reports. Passengers would come through Charles de Gaulle just to see the man on the bench. His name became famous, but his status stayed the same. Still no papers, still no passport, still no exit. Eventually, after years of negotiation, Belgium agreed to reissue his documents. A breakthrough, He could finally leave the airport. But when the papers arrived, Mehran refused them. Why? Because the name was wrong. The documents didn't list him as Sir Alfred Mehran, and they claimed he was born in Iran, which he now denied. Mehran had, over time, recreated himself. This wasn't a delusion, it was a declaration. A man saying, "You didn't care who I was for decades. Now you don't get to decide it." His lawyers begged him. Activists pleaded. Airport staff didn't understand. But Mehran chose to stay. His quiet resistance turned him into a symbol of bureaucratic cruelty, of identity lost and reclaimed, of a man fighting for the right to define himself. In 2004, Hollywood called. Steven Spielberg released a Terminal, starring Tom Hanks, loosely based on Mehran's life. But the real Mehran, he stayed in that same red bench, still writing, still waiting. At first glance, Mehran's story sounds absurd. A man trapped in an airport because of a lost passport? But look deeper, and you'll see it's not just about borders. It's about identity. Who decides who you are? A passport? A country? A piece of paper? When the world stripped Mehran of his citizenship, it also stripped him of his existence. Without papers, you don't exist in the eyes of a system. Not as a citizen. Not as a person. Not as anything. But Mehran refused to disappear. In a place where people are always leaving, he stayed. A silent protest. A still figure in a world of motion. He turned the terminal into a symbol of a man erased by politics, of the madness of bureaucracy, of how fragile home really is. In many ways, Mehran became a mirror, reflecting everything the modern world fears. Statelessness, powerlessness, loneliness. He was both nowhere and everywhere. In 2006, after 18 long years, Mehran Karimi Nasseri was hospitalized. His health had begun to fade. And finally, after nearly 2 decades, he left the airport. For the first time in years, he saw the outside world, the sky beyond the glass, trees, real air. He was eventually moved to a shelter in Paris, where he lived in obscurity, his legend slowly fading from headlines. But in the end, he came back. In November 2022, Mehran returned to Terminal 1, the same spot, the same bench, the same silence. It was where he had lived, and quietly, it became the place where he would die. No nation claimed him, no system saved him, but in his stillness, in that red bench under fluorescent lights, Mehran Karimi Nasseri became something rare, a man who turned his invisibility into a voice. A story the world could not ignore. Stories like Mehran's are strange, but they're not just stories. They're warnings of what happens when bureaucracy forgets humanity. If this story moved you, share it, comment below, and hit subscribe for more stories the world has nearly forgotten, but that deserve to be remembered.